Welcome to the deep dive. You're here because you want to get smart on important stuff quickly and without getting totally lost in the weeds.
Exactly.
Today, we're tackling a really big one, inclusive education.
Mm-hmm.
The whole idea of making sure all students learn together in regular classrooms. Doesn't matter what makes them unique, special educational needs, giftedness, maybe they're new to the country.
Right. All learners together. And the absolute key to making that actually work, it's the teachers. They need to be really well prepared.
Totally. Which brings us to professional development.
That's the connection. So we've been looking at some really fascinating research, and the big question we're digging into today is this. Does professional development actually help teachers, do inclusive education effectively?
Precisely. And we're not just sort of throwing ideas around here. We've got a huge piece of research,
Yeah.
a meta-analysis.
Yeah, the super study approach.
Exactly. For anyone not familiar, think of it like this. It pulls together the results from loads of individual studies to give us the big picture. This one looked at, get this, 342 studies.
Wow, that's a lot of data.
It is, with over 155,000 teachers and students involved. And it looked at how professional development impacted, well, everything. What teachers know, what they can actually do, their beliefs about inclusion, and even student behavior.
The really interesting part, I think, is that, okay, the overall picture is positive, but there are some real twists. Like, we see improvements across the board, knowledge, skills, beliefs, student behavior, but how much improvement varies.
Lots of nuances.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And some surprising things pop up that influence how well the PD works. Definitely some of those aha moments we look for.
Love those. And look, we know you listeners come from all different backgrounds. Maybe you're deep in education, maybe just curious. So we're going to break this down, keep it clear, conversational, no jargon dictionary needed. Okay.
Sounds good.
Right. So let's dive in. This massive analysis, all that data. What's the kind of top line result? Does this professional development for inclusive education actually work?
Well, the main finding is definitely positive. Across all those studies, they found a clear positive connection between this kind of PD and improvements for teachers in those four areas we mentioned.
Okay, so it's not just wishful thinking. The data says it generally helps.
Generally, yes. It suggests that when teachers do this kind of professional learning, it tends to have a good effect.
And they put numbers on it, right? Like, how big of an effect? Can you give us a feel for that?
They did, yeah. They used a measure called Cohen's G. Basically tells you the size of the impact. And for teachers' knowledge about inclusive ed, the effect was large. G equals 0.93.
0.93. Wow, that's pretty substantial.
It really is. Think of it as a really significant boost in understanding after the PD, like filling in major gaps.
Okay, a big jump in knowledge. That feels foundational, doesn't it? What about their actual skills? Putting that knowledge into practice in the classroom.
Right. So for skills, the effect size was moderate, around 0.49.
Moderate, okay. So still helpful.
Definitely helpful. Teachers do get better at using inclusive methods. It's a meaningful improvement. Just maybe not quite as dramatic as that knowledge leap. It kind of suggests knowing what to do often comes first, then the doing follows.
Right. You need the understanding before you can apply it. Makes sense. Okay, so more knowledge, better skills. What about beliefs? Attitudes towards inclusion. That feels like a really core piece.
Absolutely crucial. And the analysis showed a small effect there, a G of 0.23 for beliefs.
Small. So the smallest of the lot.
Yeah, smallest of the four main areas, but still positive. It indicates the PD can sort of gently nudge teachers towards more positive beliefs about including all students. It's not transforming beliefs overnight, perhaps.
Okay, a nudge. And then the ultimate question, maybe, does all this teacher stuff translate to the students? Better learning, better environment. What about student behavior?
Good question. The effect on student behavior was small to moderate, a G of 0.37.
Okay, 0.37. So there is an impact on kids.
Yes. It suggests that when teachers get this PD, it can have a positive, though maybe not always direct, impact on how students act in class. Things like, engagement in learning, maybe attendance too.
So taking it all together, it seems like professional development is, broadly speaking, a plus for inclusive education.
That's the general picture, yeah.
And just to remind everyone listening, this isn't one small study. It's pulling together hundreds. Gives us a pretty solid overview.
Definitely.
Okay, let's dig into those teacher outcomes a bit more, that big jump in knowledge.
Yeah.
What kind of knowledge are we talking about? Any interesting details there?
Sure. They looked at knowledge in two main ways. Teachers saying how knowledgeable they felt their self-rating and actual tests of their understanding.
Huh, subjective and objective.
Exactly. And interestingly, the PD seemed to boost both. Teachers felt more confident, and they actually scored better after the training.
That makes sense. Learn more, feel better about it, perform better. You mentioned interesting details, though. Anything stand out?
Yeah, there was a really fascinating bit related to teacher age. The data hinted that the knowledge gains were actually smaller for older, more experienced teachers.
Really? Smaller gains for experienced teachers. Why would that be?
Well, the researchers floated a couple of ideas. One, maybe older teachers already have a pretty solid knowledge base, right? So the new stuff is a smaller percentage increase.
Okay. Diminishing returns, maybe?
Kind of. Or the other thought was maybe there are differences in how willing or able they are to engage with totally new information compared to teachers earlier on. It's definitely something to chew on. That does experience always mean you learn new methods more easily? Or can it sometimes create resistance?
That's a really interesting point. You might assume experience helps, but maybe ingrained habits are a factor. Okay, let's shift to skills. Moderate improvement there. What specific skills did the PD help with?
When they looked at skills, it covered a few things. The overall quality of how teachers were using inclusive approaches, like are they differentiating instruction well? Using things like universal design for learning.
So the practical application.
Right. Also, the variety of methods they used. Were they drawing from a bigger toolkit? And crucially, their self-efficacy.
Self-efficacy. That's their belief in their own ability.
Exactly. A teacher's confidence that they can successfully teach diverse learners and manage an inclusive classroom.
Gotcha. So it's not just knowing the theory, but feeling like, yeah, I can actually do this day to day. And the PD helped with all that.
It did. The meta-analysis showed improvements in how well and how variedly teachers used inclusive methods, and it boosted their confidence too. And this is a really important but the researchers made.
Okay.
Even though there was improvement, it doesn't automatically mean the implementation was, perfect or consistently great across the board.
So better, but maybe not problem solved.
Precisely. There's likely still a journey, a refinement process, even after the PD is done. Progress, not necessarily perfection.
That's a crucial distinction. Okay, now beliefs. Small positive shift. This feels like the toughest nut to crack. What specific beliefs did they look at?
They broke it down a bit. Looked at general attitudes like, do teachers think inclusion is a good idea? Is it feasible? Also, their perceptions of specific inclusive teaching methods. Do they think these methods work and are practical?
Okay, attitudes and perceptions of methods.
And then their concerns.
Yeah.
Worries about the difficulties, the challenges of actually doing inclusion in their classroom.
Right. And it sounds like the PD hit those different belief types differently.
Exactly right. They found that positive effect on general attitudes towards inclusion and on perceptions of the teaching methods. So teachers felt a bit better about the whole concept and the tools they could use.
Good, but...
But, and this is the key, finding no significant impact on their underlying concerns.
That's really interesting. You'd sort of expect that feeling more skilled and knowledgeable might ease those worries. Why might that not happen?
The researchers suggested something very practical. Teachers' concerns are often rooted in real-world school issues, right?
Like lack of resources, big classes.
Exactly. Lack of resources, huge class sizes, maybe not enough support from admin or specialists. PD can build up an individual teacher, sure, but it doesn't necessarily fix those systemic environmental problems.
I see. So the teacher might feel better equipped, but the fundamental challenges causing the concern are still there.
Pretty much. It really highlights that PD is just one piece of a much bigger support system needed.
Makes a lot of sense. You can't train your way out of systemic issues alone. Was there anything interesting about how beliefs changed based on, say, prior experience?
Yes, another neat finding. Those positive shifts in how teachers viewed specific teaching methods, they were stronger when the teachers actually had relevant direct experience. Like if the PD was about supporting students with dyslexia and the teacher had a student with dyslexia in their class right then.
Immediate relevance.
Totally. It really underscores that power of relevance. When teachers see exactly how this applies to the kids right in front of them, it seems to hit home more strongly, impacting their belief in those methods.
That really clicks. Easier to buy into something when you can see the direct application.
Okay, let's turn to the students. Small to moderate positive effect on behavior. What did behavior include here?
They looked at it broadly. Included academic achievement grades, test scores, but also other important things like how engaged students were in learning and even school attendance.
So a pretty wide lens on how students are doing. And their teacher's PD had a positive, though maybe not massive, effect.
That's right. The researchers noted this fits with some previous work, but the effect size here was maybe a bit smaller than in some other meta-analyses.
Any ideas why?
They suggested maybe some of those other studies focused on really intensive long-term PD programs, or maybe included pre-service teachers, teachers still in training, who might show changes more readily as they're just forming their habits.
Right, maybe more malleable early on. You also mentioned something about how student behavior was measured mattered.
Yes, that was a really interesting methodological point. The positive effects on student behavior look larger when they were measured objectively, like researchers actually observing students in the classroom,
Compared
compared to when the data came from teachers just reporting on their students' behavior.
So potential bias in self-reporting.
It raises that possibility, yeah.
Hmm.
Maybe teacher expectations or perceptions about the PD's impact colored their reports a bit. Objective measures might give a clearer picture sometimes.
That's a critical point. Observer versus participant reports. Okay, so we know PD generally helps, but we also know not all PD is the same. What factors seem to make these programs more effective? This is where we get those aha moments about what really works.
Right, and this is where it gets really interesting, because some things often flagged as crucial for good PD. They didn't get strong, consistent backing here.
Oh, like what?
Things like having a super strong focus only on the content of inclusive ed, making sure the PD is perfectly coherent with other teacher training, the total duration of the program, even having whole teams or schools participate collectively.
Wait, those didn't consistently show a big positive impact across the board.
Not consistently across all outcomes measured in this huge analysis. Now, the researchers did add a caveat. Sometimes the descriptions of the PD in the original studies were a bit thin.
So maybe the data wasn't detailed enough to fully capture the effect?
It's possible. Made it hard to draw super firm conclusions on those specific design bets. But there were some elements that did seem to make a difference.
Okay, let's hear about those. What worked?
Well, one big one was active learning. Programs that got teachers doing things hands-on practice, working through case studies, mixing up information delivery with application.
Getting them involved, not just listening.
Exactly. Those led to bigger improvements in teacher skills, especially in actually using inclusive methods. They even found that alternating between input and practice worked better than, say, lecturing for hours than doing practice at the end.
Like learning any skill, really. You gotta do it.
You do. That spacing and doing seems key.
Makes total sense. What else stood out?
The content focus did matter for one specific outcome: student achievement.
Okay, how so?
When programs had a more targeted, specific focus, say, strategies just for students with a particular learning need, it was linked to better academic results for those students.
So going deep on something specific can pay off directly for students in that area.
It suggests that, yeah, a narrower, deeper dive might be more impactful for student learning in that specific domain.
Interesting. What about coherence? You said it wasn't a huge factor overall, but did it matter anywhere?
It did seem to matter for one thing. Teachers' perceptions of the inclusive teaching methods. When the PD lined up well with other professional learning they were doing, they tended to view the methods more positively.
Like the pieces fitting together.
Kind of. And related to that, another interesting point was prerequisites.
Prerequisites for joining the PD.
Yeah. When teachers had to meet certain criteria, like needing to have a student with relevant needs in their class right now, it positively impacted their perception of the methods and, surprisingly, student achievement too.
Wow. So that relevance piece, again, having a direct, immediate connection.
It seems really important, not just ticking the PD box, but having a real reason and context to engage makes a difference.
Valuable insight. Any other design features that made a mark?
Yes, one more. Certification. Offering some kind of certificate or formal recognition upon completion.
Did that help?
It was associated with larger gains in teacher knowledge. Maybe that extra incentive encourages deeper engagement,
Yep.
a tangible outcome.
That tracks. A little recognition can go a long way. Now, you mentioned collective participation. Whole schools training together didn't show the expected positive results. In fact, it might have been negative for student achievement. That's surprising.
It was definitely one of the more unexpected findings. The researchers speculated that when it becomes a mandatory whole staff thing,
Yeah.
it might shift from voluntary engagement to just feeling like an obligation. Less individual buy-in, maybe? Even potential for negative attitudes to spread if some aren't keen.
The mandatory meeting effect.
Could be. The data actually suggested student achievement was better when teachers participated alone or just with one or two colleagues compared to the whole school doing it.
Wow. So context and individual motivation matter hugely, not just numbers.
Seems like it. It's not just that people participate, but how and why.
Crucial takeaway. Now, with so many studies involved, did the researchers worry about the quality of the original research? Risk of bias and all that?
They did look at that. They assessed the risk of bias in the included studies and found, overall, it was moderately high.
Moderately high, so not perfect.
No, they used a specific tool for evaluation.
Yep.
And while the overall quality didn't seem to drastically change the main findings for knowledge, skills, beliefs, and student behavior, it did seem to influence some subcategories. Like, studies with a lower risk of bias tended to report slightly smaller effects for things like teachers' self-rated knowledge or their reported use of methods.
So better quality studies showed slightly smaller effects sometimes. A good reminder to always be critical.
Absolutely. Always consider the research robustness.
What about publication bias? That worry that only studies with positive results get published. The file drawer effect.
They checked for that too, using a few methods. And there was some sign that published studies might have shown larger effects for beliefs and student behavior compared to unpublished ones.
Okay, so maybe a bit of that bias.
Possibly. But a big mitigating factor here was that this meta-analysis included a lot of unpublished studies, over half of them.
Oh, that's good. Helps balance it out.
Exactly. Reduces the risk that we're only seeing the positive results. They also noted, though, that many individual studies had low statistical power, especially for beliefs in student behavior. Another thing to keep in mind.
Right. So some limitations, as always, with synthesizing lots of research, but the scale and inclusion of unpublished work make the picture relatively solid.
I think that's a fair assessment.
So let's pull it all together. What are the big implications here? How should this shape how we think about and do PD for inclusive education?
Well, the main message is pretty clear. Professional development can be a valuable tool. It works. It leads to positive changes in teacher knowledge and skills. It can nudge beliefs. And it seems to have a positive ripple effect on students.
But there's usually a but.
But it's almost certainly just one part of the solution. It's vital to see it as one component in a much bigger system of support that teachers need. To really make inclusion thrive, we need to think way beyond just the training sessions.
Right. No silver bullet here. What did the researchers suggest for future research? Where should we focus next?
They pointed out a few key areas. One big one is studying the effectiveness of the shorter-term PD that's actually most common in schools. We know more about the intensive stuff, less about making those shorter bursts really count.
Good point. Real-world constraints.
Yeah. Also, paying attention to statistical power in study design. Using better, more context-specific ways to measure teacher beliefs. Maybe focusing on responses to real classroom scenarios.
Getting more nuanced with beliefs.
Right. And, crucially, tackling that persistent issue. How do we effectively address teachers' underlying concerns and anxieties about inclusion within PD? That remains a big challenge.
Those are all really important directions. Seems we have a good base, but still lots to figure out to best support teachers.
Definitely.
So for everyone listening, the key takeaway is PD isn't magic, but it's worthwhile. We've seen how it impacts teachers and students differently. Big knowledge boost, moderate skill improvement, gentle belief shift, positive student influence.
And those nuggets about what seems to work best in the design.
Right. Active learning, focused content, making it relevant. This deep dive, hopefully, gave you that shortcut to understanding a whole lot of complex research. That's what we aim for.
Absolutely. And thinking about all this, it really leaves you with a question, doesn't it? Thinking about your own world education, policy, just being interested. What practical changes do you think could make PD programs even better at fostering truly inclusive classrooms?
Ooh, great food for thought to end on. What could we change? Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
My pleasure.
We really hope these insights were valuable, giving you a clearer picture of PD's role in inclusive education. Until our next deep dive.